Conclusion. Increasing one's inner radiance by generating wholesome desire. It is normal for unawakened persons to crave, and therefore it is unrealistic to expect them to act without being entangled or influenced by craving to some degree. The important consideration here is that craving is destructive and is the source of all suffering, both for individuals and for society, and therefore one should seek a solution to prevent the harm from craving. The primary solution is to utterly abandon craving and to prevent it from arising through the cessation of ignorance, which is achieved through wisdom. But for unawakened persons who live amidst various temptations and disturbances, and whose ignorance, craving, and grasping is constantly waiting to respond to these enticements, no matter how carefully they are and how much they intend to apply wisdom, they are unable to prevent craving from playing a role at one stage or another, either on a small scale or with force, either covertly or blatantly. The most practical solution to this problem is to establish wholesome desire, so that it can direct one's actions to the greatest possible extent. Human beings have well-developed brains. They are not bound, as other animals are, by the blind instinctual process of ignorance and craving. Human beings have the opportunity to counteract or restrain ignorance and craving through the desire for and love of goodness. If they do not practice this restraint, humans are able to perform the most horrific atrocities simply in order to experience sense pleasures, escape from disagreeable things, or protect and reinforce their sense of self. Even when people appreciate the value of wholesome desire, if craving is too strong, many of them are unable to continually act in a positive way as governed by their own sense of goodness or by the moral codes of society. Instead, they seek an easy way out in order to gratify the desires of craving. Unawakened persons are generally faced with the choice between a life governed by craving, allowing craving to be the dominant force dictating behavior, and a life in which wholesome desire is elevated to prominence, in which the person gradually escapes from the power of ignorance, craving, and clinging. If possible, one should sustain pure, unadulterated, wholesome desire, but if this is not possible, one should enlist the help of craving, but in a way that supports wholesome desire and is a condition for wholesome desire. When a person is able to establish wholesome desire as the motivation and governing force for behavior, craving will automatically be restrained and subdued. This is precisely the method advocated by Buddhism to control and abandon craving. The teachings do not advocate trying to deal with craving in a clueless and witless way, without understanding the factors involved, which only increases ignorance and leads to more harm than good. Wholesome desire must be accompanied by wisdom. Concerning this subject of motivation, there are 3 important points for review. Take the following example. 1. 2 boys named Craving and Chanda have the opportunity to listen to a radio, a device they have never encountered before. Craving is delighted by these lovely strange sounds. He believes that it must surely be great fun to own a radio, and he knows that owning a radio is cool. If he can get one, he will be extremely popular with his friends. He will be so proud of himself and show off to others. When he arrives back home, he pesters his parents to buy him a radio. He even thinks that if his parents refuse to buy him a radio, he will sneak around the shop and find a chance to steal one. As for Chanda, he is amazed when he hears the sounds coming from the radio. He asks himself, how does this machine make these sounds? How do people create such a machine? For what can a radio be used? He desires answers to these questions and thus pays close attention and makes inquiries. He seeks out a technician to gain more knowledge. He is so deeply impressed by the benefits of a radio that he may even want to build one from scratch. Consider how the different ways of thinking of these two boys will affect their behavior, and how their conduct will influence their friends, family, and society. The initial responses and mental processes of these two boys are similar. The sense-based, the ear, plus the sense impressions, a sound, to hearing, ear consciousness, sota vijnana, equals the cognition of sound, contact, phassa, to sensation, vedana, the feeling of pleasure. But following on from feeling, the mental processes differ distinctly for these two individuals. When craving experiences the pleasurable sensation from hearing the radio, he forms an infatuation and he desires more of this pleasure. Based on this desire, his thoughts are incoherent. He does not apply wise reflection by considering the truth and analyzing the facts about the radio. His thoughts of sense pleasure and self-aggrandizement are determined by craving. These thoughts feed ignorance and intensify craving. His entire behavior is governed by craving. Chanda, on the other hand, does not allow the process to spill over from feeling into craving. Instead, he applies wise reflection in order to block off and end craving. Wise, rational reflection thoroughly examines the objects encountered and asks such questions as, what is this? How did this come to be? What does this depend on? And what are its advantages and disadvantages? This way of thinking leads to an understanding of an object's true value, to wholesome enthusiasm, to active engagement with the object, and to deeper learning. 2. Although Chanda is a wholesome, pure quality and is beneficial to a person's life, its benefits depend on the degree of understanding concerning the truth and value of the things a person interacts with. This is because Chanda relies on reasoned analysis, yoniso manasikara, which is the beginning stage of wisdom. If a person's understanding is inadequately deep or clear, Chanda may lead to errors in judgment. Therefore, in order for Chanda to be a truly reliable instrument for leading a person to the highest goal, the development of wisdom, or an education aimed to cultivate wisdom, is a vital principle in Buddhism. A person should begin by developing reasoned analysis, to be skilled in reflecting on the truth and investigating causality, and to ask such questions as, what is the truth? What is truly beneficial to my life? And what is worthy as a goal in life? One should then develop virtues by generating a desire for and love of truth, a love of goodness, and a desire for an enhanced quality of life. By increasing these virtues, one reaches the highest stage of wisdom and brings about utter deliverance and freedom of the mind. 3. When Chanda conditions craving, the result is most often harmful even for a well-intentioned person. Even though good people may not become arrogant or overbearing by attaching to or identifying with the goodness they have created by wholesome desire, subtle attachments can still cause a considerable amount of suffering. For example, a person may have the following thoughts: why is my house, my monastery, my school not as clean and well organized as theirs? I have tried my utmost to train this pupil and sought every possible way to provide help and advice. Why does he not improve? I have done everything to help these people become more self-reliant. Why do they not make an effort and progress as quickly as I desire? And when the causes and conditions lie beyond the power of good people to rectify, this can increase their suffering and sense of affliction. This form of suffering is particular to virtuous people. A base, immoral person is not troubled by such circumstances. It is fair to say that virtuous people experience a unique form of suffering. Suffering then offers an opportunity for the wheel of mental defilement to spin once more, generating such mind states as confusion, depression, self-pity, indignation, restlessness, and hot-headedness. Therefore, being a good person is not enough. A good person requires help in order to be free from suffering, to have no hidden vices, and to not convert back to acting immorally. The factor that provides this freedom and prevents craving from returning is wisdom, which leads to the supreme liberation of the mind. A person who desires this state of liberation should apply wholesome desire to lead the way. Consummate wholesome desire. The preceding material should help to dispel some common doubts, including: do arahants who have completely done away with craving and thus cannot call upon it as a source of motivation consequently become indifferent, lethargic, and spiritless? Are arahants, despite their wisdom, able to act without the desire of craving? As mentioned earlier, craving is not the sole motivating factor behind people's behavior. Moreover, craving is not only a motivation for action, it is also a motivation for non-action and for laziness. Regardless of whether craving induces action or non-action, it is accompanied by agitation and is unreliable. For this reason, people should cultivate a truly wholesome and secure form of desire. When people engage in such cultivation, the role of craving is lessened and ignorance and delusion decrease. Wisdom paves the way for a prudent application of wholesome desire, leading to blessings for one's own life and for everyone with whom one comes into contact. Eventually, when this cultivation is complete and delusion is fully dispelled with the realization of arahantship, one need not rely on craving as a motivation. Wisdom assists wholesome desire, chanda, to guide all of one's activities with the clear understanding that one's actions are truly beneficial. At this stage, wholesome desire directs one's activities according to the supervision by wisdom. There remains no unfinished personal business for arahants to do, because they are fully satisfied and complete. Their thoughts focus entirely on how to increase the happiness of others, which conforms to the maxim of the arahants: Bahu jana sukhaya lokanu kampaya, to act for the happiness of the many folk, for the compassionate assistance of the world. In this regard, the Buddha was chief. Besides acting as a guide for those people still engaged in spiritual development, he also guided awakened beings in performing good deeds for the many folk. In this respect, the Buddha was indefatigable, because he was a true master, Sarajana, a true liberated one, Sarajana, unhindered by any internal craving. He was replete with wholesome desire and could act to the utmost of his ability. This consummate wholesome desire is one of the Buddha's attributes. It is one of the 18 qualities of the Buddha, Buddha Dharma, referred to in the phrase, the Buddha is endowed with unremitting wholesome desire. Motivated by this unremitting wholesome desire, the Buddha acted to liberate beings from mental impurity, suffering and distress, and to lead them to peace by way of his great kindness and compassion. Great beings are guided by wisdom and compassion. Wisdom does not arise in isolation, rather it helps to generate other virtues as well. When people fall under the sway of ignorance and indulge in sensations rather than rely on understanding, they permit craving to dictate their actions. But when wisdom is cultivated, wholesome desire chanda grows in strength and has the opportunity to direct people's affairs without being overwhelmed by craving and delusion. Supported by wisdom, wholesome desire carries out a person's work. Furthermore, wholesome desire mobilizes other spiritual qualities to help generate fulfillment and integrity. In particular, it mobilizes compassion, which plays a pivotal role in one's interaction with others. When one gains a deeper understanding of the truth and of the true value of things, if one does not permit craving to interfere and take over, wholesome enthusiasm will invariably arise. One will be inspired by and develop an aspiration for goodness. One will desire that things be sustained in a state of prosperity and excellence. If one encounters a lack of such prosperity and excellence, wholesome desire will act to bring this to fulfillment. This is the case in general. If one is relating to other sentient beings, however, wholesome desire chanda manifests as the state of mind, referred to as loving kindness metta. The desire for other beings' happiness and well-being, a wish for them to achieve prosperity, to be safe, and be free from all forms of oppression. The wholesome desire chanda for other beings to abide in a state of well-being and integrity is not expressed solely by way of loving kindness. Rather, its expression is determined by the specific circumstances that others find themselves. Loving kindness and friendliness manifest in ordinary circumstances. If these circumstances vary, however, wholesome desire is expressed differently and is designated accordingly. If the ordinary state of affairs accompanied by loving kindness is labelled the first factor, then the second set of circumstances pertains to when living beings fall on hard times and are distressed, say in times of illness or destitution. In these circumstances, wholesome desire is expressed by way of compassion, karuna, to feel empathy and to wish to help release others from suffering. The third factor pertains to times when others rise above ordinary circumstances. For example, they finish their studies, they find employment, they are cured from illness, they give up drinking alcohol, or they turn over a new leaf and practice virtue. Here, wholesome desire is content and satisfied. One experiences appreciative joy in mudita. One shares and rejoices in the delight of others. One wishes to support them so that they continue to prosper and progress. The fourth factor is special. When others develop a sense of self-responsibility, or it is suitable that they have such responsibility, then we should not interfere. This factor applies, for example, in the administration of justice and in education. Take the case of parents who wish for their toddler to succeed at walking. They should look on closely at a detached manner, allowing the child to practice on her own. They are ready to assist if the child trips, but they do not carry her around all the time out of fear that she may fall. This refraining from interference is referred to as equanimity upekkha. One may wonder how equanimity is connected to wholesome desire and well-wishing. In fact, this is the ultimate form of well-wishing, based on true wisdom. One wishes for others to be successful and upright. One wishes for them to abide in correctness and safety. One wishes for them to be grounded in righteousness. These are the key spiritual qualities that fall in the wake of wholesome desire chanda. Everyone can develop these qualities, but they are exceptional within the minds of arahants, who are completely liberated from suffering. When they witness how unawakened beings are tormented by suffering, their foremost response is compassion, karuna. The problem for unawakened persons is that in these aforementioned situations they tend to be governed by ignorance and craving. They will either be searching for some form of pleasure, or they will be fretting over a cherished sense of self, a self that needs protection and pampering, and therefore a pure spacious wisdom accompanied by compassion cannot arise. There are times, however, when the mind of unawakened people is clear and spacious, and they apply wise reflection. They reflect on harmony with causality and with the truth, and thus cut off any opportunity for ignorance and craving to interfere. Wisdom here paves the way for compassion. An arahant has made an end to ignorance and craving, and neither anxiously searches for pleasure nor worries about self-stability or self-importance. Pure wisdom is constantly prepared for wholesome desire to express compassion whenever an arahant encounters a fellow being in suffering. The end of ignorance, craving and grasping enables an arahant to act with purity, to act blamelessly and without such inhibiting defilements as fear and laziness. The motivating force behind an arahant's actions is comprised of two factors, wisdom and compassion. With wisdom lighting up the way and compassion acting as a force propelling them onwards, the purified ones, the Buddha and the Arahants, act steadfastly and earnestly for the welfare and happiness of the many folk. The great works, the Buddha's deeds, Buddha Kicha, and the activities of teaching, Sasana Kicha, have resulted in the Buddha Dhamma and the Buddhist religion, which remain to this day.